Let me start by saying thank you to everyone who has reached out to ask me if me and my family are okay following Hurricane Helene. We are well. We have no damage from the storm. We're in the center of the state of North Carolina, and we were blessed. We had a lot of rain. There were trees down on the roads, but power was out for a while, but our home, our pets, and our possessions are fine. And as some of you know, me and my family were actually on a cruise ship in the Gulf and in the Atlantic during the storm. We left out of Tampa on Monday. We were supposed to go to a couple ports in Mexico, but we ended up in the Bahamas for a couple days. We had rough seas one day as a result of the storm, and we were actually stuck on the boat for an extra day while they worked on the Tampa Bay port before they would let us dock. And we had to reschedule some flights a couple times, but all in all, it went very smoothly. And my favorite part of the vacation wasn't actually the cruise, it was Busch Gardens in Tampa. And if you like roller coasters and rides, it is the place to be. And the zoo inside there is great too. It's better than the actual Tampa Zoo. All right, enough of that. Let's get back to the First Crusade. As we continue discussing the many reasons why the Crusades should not be glorified, I want to talk about the infighting, the deceptions, the plans within plans, and the real goals of the leaders of the First Crusade. If you think you knew a lot about the Crusades, wait till the end of this video. We need to talk about Alexius I and the Seljuk Turks. If you remember back to the first video in this series where we talked about Pope Urban II and Emperor Alexius I Komnenos, Pope Urban II called for a crusade after a plea from Alexios I was made to free the Holy Land and the Eastern Empire from the dreaded Saracen Seljuk Turks. But let me drop this bomb on you. Alexius I came to power largely with the help of the Seljuk Turks. He had a group of 2,000 Seljuk Turks in his army when he fought against the Normans and even the other Roman Christians in his coup for the throne and control of Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire. But wait, there is more. His chief military advisor that he sent on the Crusades along with the Westerners was himself a Seljuk Turk. That's right, guiding the Christians on the crusade to Nicaea, Antioch, Jaffa, and Jerusalem and other places was none other than a Seljuk Turk. But the pièce de résistance is that after the Battle of Nicaea and the victory of the Crusaders, none other than Emperor Alexius I rescued the Seljuk Turks from Nicaea. He snuck them away safely, away from the city, and gave them gifts to win their allegiance in case he needed to use them to squash the very crusaders that he had asked the Pope to send in order to liberate him from those same Seljuk Turks. Now is a good time to remind you that Alexius I had to deal with a number of coups during his reign, and he had learned one thing well: don't trust anyone. Now this blows my mind. People are glorifying the Crusades as this great thing because Christians took the battle to the evil Muslims, but the very emperor who started it all was secretly using them, aligning with them, paying them, and making strategic agreements with them against the Crusaders. I guess the saying is true: politics makes strange bedfellows. Let's talk about the key players in the crusade. Last week I talked about Peter the Hermit and Count Emicho. What these guys did was infantile compared to the lunacy of the key leaders of the First Crusade. There are 5 names that I want to familiarize you with in this video: Godfrey of Bouillon, Baldwin of Bouillon, Raymond IV of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, Hugh of Vermandois, and Robert of Normandy. Godfrey of Bouillon was a French nobleman who became one of the most prominent leaders of the First Crusade. While he was a religious zealot, he was heavily driven by the opportunity for land and power. He was all about gaining power. He had multiple disputes with Raymond of Toulouse, who refused to hand over control of the Tower of David after taking Jerusalem and other things. This guy was always plotting. At every battle, he was trying to make sure that he got his. He ended up controlling half of Antioch and half of Jerusalem. And he didn't want to let go of control of either city despite having promised to return all lands gained to Emperor Alexius I. Godfrey would finally be crowned the ruler of the kingdom of Jerusalem. Now, Baldwin of Bouillon was the brother of Godfrey of Bouillon. Early in the crusade, as Godfrey and Baldwin were making their way to Constantinople through Eastern Europe, Baldwin was repeatedly dropped off as a prisoner or a hostage by his own brother to convince the local rulers that they would pass through peacefully. It was a common practice of that day, but it still seems weird. Hello, my name is Baldwin. Hello, Baldwin. What do you bring to this crusade? I'm a hostage. But Baldwin would eventually get paid. Eventually, he would break away from the main group in 1097 in hopes to make a name for himself in the East. He was invited to Edessa by the Armenian ruler of the city, whose name was Thoros. He sought Baldwin's support in fighting the Muslims, and Thoros adopted Baldwin as his son and heir in a ritual that was common in the East. And this would ensure the succession of Thoros, but it would also promise a future to Baldwin. However, not long after Baldwin's arrival, Thoros' plans were interrupted as he suddenly came down with a case of being dead. Thoros was assassinated in March 1098, and many historians believe that Baldwin may have either had an active role in the assassination of his new father, or that he was at least passive in not preventing the plot to kill Thoros. And why would he prevent it? He was the legal heir to Edessa. And now that Thoros is dead, he assumed power with the support of the locals and, of course, his own military entourage. And he established the county of Edessa, and he became the leader of the First Crusader state. He went from being typecast as a hostage to a powerful ruler who would end up contributing reinforcements to the primary crusading force later when they finally get to Palestine. Now, Raymond IV of Toulouse, also known as Raymond of St. Gilles, was one of the wealthiest and most powerful nobles to join the crusade. And as I said when discussing Godfrey, he and Raymond went at it like toddlers fighting over the same toy. Raymond would eventually withdraw his claim from Antioch, but not without fighting with both Godfrey and Bohemond. Eventually, Raymond would be offered the crown of the new kingdom of Jerusalem, but he declines it for political reasons. And Raymond would eventually attack modern-day Lebanon and lay siege to Tripoli in 1102. And he would die there in 1105 before the city was finally captured. Now, Bohemond of Taranto was a nobleman. He was a Norman who was a nobleman who played a significant role in the crusade. He was driven by his desire for wealth and power. He's the guy who famously used the rallying cry, "We will all be rich." He also paid his people well and bought many people from the other camps to join his side in the promise of great riches. There's no doubt, Bohemond was in it to win it, down here. He was not laying up treasures for himself in heaven. He was trying to get as much as he could in this life. He was a key player in the siege of Antioch, and they committed horrible acts of violence against the city's Muslim population, where he would eventually claim the city for himself. And once Bohemond got inside the city walls of Antioch, he massacred the Muslims inside and looted everything they could find. Then there's Hugh of Vermandois, the brother of the King of France, Philip I, who was trying to atone for his brother's excommunication and to gain favor with the church. Now, his role is minor, and he ends up returning to Europe quite early in the campaign, I guess because he decided his brother could atone for his own sins. Then there's Robert of Normandy, the eldest son of William the Conqueror. But he'd been passed over in favor of his younger brother, and he sought to make a name for himself, and he was considered one of the bravest men in the First Crusade. Now, this guy was pivotal in capturing Antioch and Ascalon, and he wasn't much of a politician at all, and he may have actually been one of the good guys. He didn't become king, he didn't get filthy rich during the crusade, and he didn't carve out a kingdom for himself, and when the crusade was over, he went home. And then he just fought with his brother. But isn't that what all brothers are supposed to do? Now, there is one critical figure looming in the background that we really haven't talked much about in this video, and that's Pope Urban II. Remember how he played on people's emotions using the hundreds of years old stories about how the Muslims were cutting open Christians to see if they had swallowed any treasure? Well, guess what the Crusaders did? During the siege of Marwa in 1098 in Syria, the Crusaders engaged in extreme violence. Because they faced shortages of food and supplies, the Crusaders committed great atrocities. Albert of Aachen and Rudolph of Caen wrote that the Crusaders cut open the bodies of many of the city's population, thinking they had swallowed valuable treasures. Now, these Christians were on a mission to rescue people and recapture the land from men who had supposedly done terrible things. And during the Crusades, these so-called Christians ended up doing the exact same thing that had so angered them and motivated them to go on crusade in the first place. That's not Christianity. This is not Christ-like. This is not the fruit of the Spirit. This is not carrying the gospel. But this isn't the end of it. The ultimate goal of the First Crusade was to free Jerusalem and make it safe for Christians once again. But once the city of Jerusalem fell, the Crusaders massacred Muslims and Jews indiscriminately. Contemporary historians and chroniclers wrote of the streets running with blood due to the thousands and thousands of civilians that were butchered, including men, women, and children. But it's okay. They had the sign of the cross on their shoulder, so that makes it good, right? Well, that's not how Christianity is supposed to spread. This is how Islam spread. Islam was forced upon people by compulsion and pain of death. The job of the Christian is to propagate Christians, but we're to be Christ-like. We're to be His humble slaves. We're to spread the good news of the gospel. We're to go and make disciples. We're not commanded to butcher innocent women and children. We're not commanded to slaughter in His name. There is no Christian prince in the New Testament. There are only slaves of Christ and slaves of righteousness. These acts were not righteous. They were rotten to the core. And let me leave you with this. All these leaders vowed to return any conquered lands back to Emperor Alexius I. But it didn't happen. And in the end, one of the biggest winners was none other than Pope Urban II. Why do I say that? Plans within plans. It was an absolute brilliant plan that I don't find many historians really focusing on. For centuries, the Patriarch of Jerusalem had been appointed by and was an ally of Constantinople. He was, I'm going to say it, he was essentially a pawn of the Eastern Roman Empire, or definitely an ally. But with the Great Schism of 1054 and the division between the Eastern and Western churches, the establishment of the Kingdom of Jerusalem by the Western Crusaders allowed the Pope to place his own appointed patriarch at Jerusalem. At the end of the First Crusade, Emperor Alexius I had made marginal gains. Pope Urban II, however, had just gained control of the Holy Land and placed his own ally over the church at Jerusalem. And this is what some Christian nationalists today are glorifying. They want a Christian prince who can exercise righteous judgment in the name of Christ. Show me that in the New Testament. It ain't there. There's only one prince, and he's Sar Shalom. He is the Prince of Peace. He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And we don't need another Constantine. We need Pauls. We need Timothys. We need men who are willing to preach the gospel until someone kills them for it. And instead of taking the sign of the cross, let us take up our cross and let us die on it. May our wills be crucified with Christ. May our ambitions and our dreams be crucified with Christ. And may we, as humble slaves, surrender fully to the sovereign will of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ. Don't glorify the Crusades. And may we not merely wear the sign of the cross on our shoulder, but may it be seared upon our hearts as a brand to remind us that we are bought with a price. Let us honor our Master and be faithful to the Great Commission and leave judgment to Him.